Today we're going to be talking about the V60 Non-Invasive Ventilator. The V60 can be utilized to deliver what is commonly referred to as BiPAP. It can also be used for CPAP. It can also be used for invasive ventilation on both endotracheal tubes and tracheostomies. It is a pressure ventilator, time cycled. So you cannot dial in a volume, you are delivering pressures. With this, I'm going to go over the machine first, and then in the next videos we'll go over the actual settings and turning on the machine. First, this is the front of the machine, and this is the back of the machine. Why is this important? You have your 50 psi hose right here that goes to the wall for the 50 psi source. If you look down here, you have two yoke systems. The yoke systems, or holders, they're tank holders. You can put two E cylinders on this, and this is what is called the manifold. Each one will go to a 50 psi connector on your E cylinder. The common question is, can you use one tank at a time, or do you want to use two tanks at a time? In practice and in just experience, it all depends on the FiO2 and the demand of the patient. If your patient is on a lower FiO2, like 50%, 40%, something like that, you could get by with one tank, run it dry, then hook up your second tank. If your patient is breathing hard and on a high FiO2, to meet the inspiratory demand with 100% FiO2, you will need both tanks. This is for transport. When you are back in the hospital or back in the room and hooked up to the wall, disconnect from the tanks. This will prevent your tanks from being bled dry. You don't want to have to go on an emergency transport and you have empty tanks. So when you get back to the room or when you're hooked up to the wall, disconnect from the tanks. And that's where you'll hook up to the wall here. This fan right here is a computer cooling fan. This computer cooling fan cools all the componentry in here. If it is white, that means it is probably covered with all the dust and it needs to be cleaned. You just take a pair of keys or something. When this is turned off, you don't want to damage the fan. Pop the grate out and you clean there's a little membrane in there, and you want to clean it, and then you pop it all back together. Again, this is the oxygen manifold right here. You have one 50 psi hose to go to the wall, two to go to the tanks. The tanks are held here in the holding system. You have a storage basket all the way on the bottom for extra masks, different items like that. Turning this around, as you see, you can do heated humidification on it. We have our Fisher-Paykel heater on it. And turning it to the side, this is a support arm to hold the BiPAP circuit and just get it to where it's comfortable for the patient. Going over the circuit real quick. This is our circuit. Again, we're going to, just like with the Mark 8, we're going to put a bacterial static, viral static filter on the output to the patient. This also has pictures on it so you can see mask. If the patient is on a mask, move this up so you can see it. If the patient is on a mask, then that extra hose goes there on the pressure port. If they're on an ET tube, again, the pressure port. Looking at the circuit, you have two ends. This end has the exhalation valve, and it will not fit here. It does not connect. This end does connect. It goes right on. Then you take your pressure line, this one right here, and it only goes one spot, right there. Now this is where you would place your mask. Right now we're not using a mask. For purposes of this, we're going to be using a test lung. Hook it up just like that. That goes over there. Remember, when you're using your heater, turn it on non-invasive. Another thing that you want to check, this would be before you even go to the patient's room, is to make sure the patient's filter is clean. There's a little twist lock down here. Open it. This side lifts off. If you see there are vents here, this is where the air goes in that the patient will be breathing. And there is a filter on the side, right here. We do not really replace it. If it is really, really dirty, your department or bioengineering will need to replace it and fix it. But this is something that we just need to check between patients. And this goes back in, it lines up, and it takes a little bit, goes up, and you'll twist it and lock it in place. There, locked. And it does not come off. That is the basics of the external portion of the V60 Respironics V60 ventilator. Pressure limited, time cycled. You can use it with or without active humidification. If you're using active humidification, of course, you will have a hose coming from here to your chamber, from your chamber to here, or it'll go right there and you'll have another hose coming down, just like the high flow nasal cannula. In the next video, we'll go over some of the internal controls.